For fostering a wonderfully creative and sadistic community, Trials Evolution. So most games that have a user-generated content component that claim to do it very well, a lot of times what tends to happen is that the stuff you find in that marketplace of user-generated content, it can be pretty hit or miss. The amazing thing about Trials Evolution is looking through that store, you're just going to find tons and tons of great content and great levels that people have created that are not only well built and are very challenging, but they're also a ton of fun to play. And they all seem to carry forward the themes from the Red Lynx generated levels of just they're incredibly abusive either to the player or to the writer. Whether that means that they're just putting you through these extremely punishing courses or just doing terrible things like, as soon as you complete a level, dropping trains and bombs and pianos on you. If you've played Trials Evolution and you haven't looked in the Track Central Marketplace, I highly urge you to do so. There's so much fantastic content in there. And if you haven't played Trials Evolution, then what are you waiting for? For excellence in heartstring tugging, The Walking Dead.
Lee, are those bad people dead?
We didn't kill them, so I don't know. They might have been able to get away from the walkers, but I'm sure they won't be coming after us.
That's good.
Hey, Dad, what's that noise?
Being concerned about your own safety and your own well-being is one thing, and a lot of games make you very concerned about protecting yourself. But being concerned about the safety and well-being of a child is something else entirely. And even though The Walking Dead is this zombie game, what it's really about at its core is the relationship between this adult, Lee Everett, who you play, and Clementine, this 9-year-old girl.
I don't know what happened, but I'll look after you until then.
And as Lee, so many of your decisions have really huge ramifications for Clementine's safety and well-being, which makes them so much more heavy and agonizing. And the way that The Walking Dead develops this relationship between you and Clementine makes you really, really care and really consider the ways that your decisions impact her. It's the most moving relationship between an adult guardian and a child that I've ever encountered in a game, and it results in one of the most just emotionally involving and ultimately powerful video game narratives I've ever experienced.
No!
Get the hell out of here. I'll catch up with you.
For its subversive analysis of modern military shooters, Spec Ops: The Line.
That all of them?
Think we're clear.
What about the civilians? 33rd get away with any of them?
Yeah, they did.
Don't need a translator to know they're hurt.
So the great thing about Spec Ops: The Line is that it takes tropes that we associate with military shooters and instead turns them on their head and subverts them. So the moments that you expect are going to be power fantasies instead become these moments of horror when you realize the kinds of disasters that you can wreak upon other human beings. And as you watch the main character sort of devolve from, an upstanding soldier into, this place of darkness, it's really horrifying to watch this happen. And the way that the game really makes us look inwards to ourselves and the way we play military shooters and the way we have to look at military shooters as a whole is what really makes the narrative in Spec Ops special.
Yeah, it is. That's why Gould stormed this place. He didn't want the king. He was trying to rescue his people. This is your...
For dragging the 80s screaming and kicking into 2012, Hotline Miami.
Some games are so self-assured and stylish that you can't help but love them, and Hotline Miami is one of those games. It's a game that channels the style and excess of the 80s into an experience that is both daring and yet completely sure of itself. Mechanically, it's quite unique, a top-down twitch shooter with melee components in which a single strike or bullet can kill you, but it's Hotline's style that makes it so much fun. Drugs, psychosis, prostitution and murder combine to create a ballet of death that at times is beautiful. Your psychotic rampage or end goal are barely explained, but the joy of murder is reward enough. That and more time to listen to the frankly outstanding soundtrack. Games often try to be cool and rarely do they pull it off. Hotline Miami is cool. It's so cool, it doesn't care that you think it's cool.
For breaking hearts with bullets and blood, 30 Flights of Loving.
Increasingly in recent years, we've seen game developers be more and more willing to experiment with the kinds of stories that their games tell, with the substance of those stories. But what 30 Flights of Loving does is experiment with how a game can tell a story. This is a game that uses smash cuts to take you backward and forward in time in this manner that's initially really disorienting, but also really exciting because it's so unlike most games that we've played. And it doesn't insult your intelligence, it doesn't spell everything out for you, it gives you just enough information to put the pieces together yourself. And in its very brief 15-minute runtime, it communicates a story that is poignant and violent and has just great crime, heist, thriller elements and a love story and so much stuff going on that even though it only takes 15 minutes to play from start to finish, those are 15 minutes that you are not going to forget.
For excellent and experimental storytelling, Dear Esther.
Dear Esther is one of those games that's never really going to win an end-of-year award. It doesn't comfortably fit in any established genre, and you could argue that it's not really a game at all.
Dear Esther. The morning after I was washed ashore, salt in my ears, sand in my mouth, and the waves always at my ankles, I felt as though everything had conspired to this one last shipwreck.
What it is, though, is a glimpse into what's possible with storytelling in games, a window into how the interactive medium can enrich and personalize the narrative experience. It's a short experience. The game only lasts about 2 hours, but its effects will stay with you much longer. You'll most likely spend at least that much time again browsing forums for answers to its cryptic questions. In a year where the first-person genre became increasingly bereft of new ideas, Dear Esther was a welcomed breath of fresh air. So we're awarding Dear Esther the 2012 Special Achievement for excellent and experimental storytelling.
For doing DLC the way it should be done, Artorias the Abyss.
So DLC has this nasty habit of feeling exploitive, that if you don't buy it, you're missing out on some single player content that's important, or you're missing out on some maps that are important. Artorias of Abyss doesn't fall into that. It comes out more than a year after the original game was first released, and it feels just like a separate story that builds on the wonder and adventure of the original Dark Souls. And not only that, but because they had so much time to work on this individually instead of just getting it out the door, it's really good. I mean, it explores themes that were never touched on in the original game, and the main character, Artorias, is an interesting, corrupted figure who is not trying to be evil, but he becomes that way. And it's the way that it looks at the world in a new light that gives you new appreciation for the overall narrative that Dark Souls are trying to tell.
For proving that man is more dangerous than zombies, DayZ.
There's only one thing more terrifying than coming face to face with hordes of the undead, and that's crossing paths with other survivors. DayZ manages to capture the essence of the perfect meeting point between our intrinsic need to do whatever it takes to fight on the day, while simultaneously probing our ethics at every turn by asking what we're willing to do to stay alive. Do you play the role of a bandit, gunning everybody down to maintain your spot at the top of the food chain? Are you the nice guy, making house calls to strangers with broken bones and those slowly bleeding out? Or do you keep to yourself, scrounging out an existence by avoiding the big cities for as long as possible, hoping you'll never need to exercise your trigger finger? The choice is yours. Sure, the learning curve is steep, but somehow every death is a fresh start. Players quickly become wary of the threats to their existence from those they share the world with, adding to the game's tension. Is this stranger my savior or my executor? For proving that man is more dangerous than zombies, we salute you, DayZ.
For motion controls that nurture human-horse relationships, Fable: The Journey.
So the Kinect sucks, right? It does suck. The Kinect sucks. It's all about like gyrating like an idiot in your room, and it doesn't actually work, and nobody likes it, and it's not fun. And then along comes this game, Fable: The Journey, where everyone's like, oh, it's not a role-playing game, it's very different, it's on rails. And it turns out that it's like expertly uses the Kinect that makes it a viable control medium. And it does that by letting you interact with your horse with your hands. And it sounds like a very little thing, but you've become really attached to this creature because you clean it up and you remove it, arrows that are piercing its hide, and you fix its wounds, and it's like this slow connection over the game that only works because of the Kinect. So I guess the Kinect only mostly sucks.
You know, don't you?
For wonderfully destructive enemies, Binary Domain.
Is there no end to these bastards?
So most of your time in Binary Domain is spent shooting robot enemies, and they're bipedal, they look like humans, kind of, but they're all metallic and they've got all this plating and arms and stuff. But what makes it so fun and what elevates this sort of pretty standard shooter action is how these enemies are destroyed in so many different ways. You shoot one of them in the arm and it drops its gun, it'll pick up the gun and keep coming at you. You shoot it in the leg, you shoot its foot off, and it will come at you like with its shin stump, like limping at you. And then if its legs are gone, it'll crawl. If you shoot it in the head, it'll like short circuit and start shooting its other enemy and turn to your side. And so the way that they behave and the animations are so interesting and involved that it just makes what otherwise is a pretty standard shooter just so fun to play.
For reminding us that Persona 4 is still awesome, Persona 4 Golden.
So as tons of commenters have pointed out, we ignored Persona 4 Golden this year. And it's not because it's not great, it's because we don't recognize remakes. But this game is phenomenal because it takes like the traditional JRPG tropes that you would get as far as like, you know, the battles that play out and the character relationships, and puts it in a modern time, and just making it so much more relatable makes this game so engrossing. And it is the reason to play the Vita right now, and it is the reason to not think about any other game until you sink all 100 plus hours it takes to see this amazing, wonderful story and adventure.
For delivering on its promise after being funded, FTL, Faster Than Light.
One of the most defining things for video game development in 2012 was the explosion of Kickstarter and the viability of being able to crowdfund video games. After Double Fine raised over $3 million, it seemed like every indie and old school game developer jumped on the bandwagon. Faster Than Light from Subset Games was one of the first games to finally emerge out of this explosion. We helped it raise over $200,000, and boy was it good. The game is a space flight simulator, recreating the feeling of sci-fi shows like Firefly, Star Trek, and Battlestar Galactica. You command your ship through various dangerous sections of space, micromanaging your crew to take care of your ship's functions, power usage, oxygen, shields, drones, teleporters, and more, all while attempting to charge and time your weapon attacks to take down enemy ships during battles. Fires will break out, space pirates will board your ship, and you will panic. You'll often find yourself in situations where you're frantically trying to repair the holes in your hull while you remotely open the airlock in an effort to suffocate the crazy mantis men, slaughtering your crew faster than you can heal them. And in roguelike tradition, no matter how much you think you've adequately upgraded your ship, you will fail again and again. But you'll probably want to jump straight back in with a different ship configuration and do it all over because it's just so damn satisfying. We can only hope that all those games we've been kickstarting over the past year manage to reach the same kind of heights as FTL.